Hey, welcome back to That 70s Card Show. I'm your host, John Keating, and I thank you for joining me as I take a look back at the cards and the culture of the very colorful 1970s. We'll revisit a more simple time in our hobby by taking a deep dive into the sets and the stats with a generous amount of DAG effects sprinkled in. That 70s Card Show is currently sponsored by nobody. If you have a comment or suggestion, I urge you to drop me a line at ThatSeventiesCardShow@gmail.com, That 70s Card Show on YouTube or on Twitter at 70sCard. Just drop me a comment, suggestion, criticism, whatever you like. So this is episode 50 of That 70s Card Show, and I've put together what I feel is kind of a special little show for us, for me, maybe. Obviously, I celebrate the 70s, and 70s baseball was my life when I was a kid, for sure. That's what shaped me and kind of stunted my growth for the rest of my life when it comes to baseball fanaticism. So here we are, episode 50. I've decided to name myself a all-star team for the 1970s. So what we're going to find here is 9 players to play out in the field and maybe come up at bat a few times. This team is so good, they'll probably only bat 8 times. I've also decided to name ourselves a manager and an honorary captain at the very end. So in order to be eligible for this list, you will have had to made your debut in 1970 at the latest, and played throughout the decade up to 1979 at least, if you are a baseball player. Managers a little different. Don't expect managers to manage 10 consecutive years, especially these days, but just so happens that the top 2 managers, 1 and 2 here, did manage all 10 years in the 1970s. So, sorry about that. I'm looking at something under my desk. So some of the criteria here that we went by, of course, for management, it is, the amount of games you won, winning percentage, and some of that hardware that you were able to bring home at the end of the season. Pitchers, we're talking about wins, we're talking about strikeouts, innings pitched, win percentage, ERA, hits per 9, whip per 9, shutouts, and that very controversial WAR stat for all you warmongers out there. Hitters, we're talking hits, home runs, RBIs. Again, WAR, total bases, runs, on base percentage, batting average, slugging percentage, and maybe your OPS as well. Players, where we put them in the field here may be a little bit janky to some, but I assure you that if one of these players was slotted into a position, they will have spent substantial time at that position in the field at some point in the 70s. So what may be strange for us now was not so strange back in the day. I want to thank Baseball Reference. I want to thank Wikipedia, Trading Card Database, and such helped me with my research here. So I guess we'll get right into it here. Right? So let me get to the bread and butter of this. So managers. So managers here, I'm sure we will have expected the usual suspects here. Billy Martin managed 3 teams in the 70s. Chuck Tanner managed 2 teams, won himself a World Series. Dick Williams surprisingly managed 3 teams and won a pair of World Series championships. So each of those 3 guys I mentioned, between the 3 of them, they won 4 titles in the 70s. Pretty reputable managers, but they don't hold a candle to the 2 guys that I've highlighted here, and those are George Sparky Anderson and Earl Weaver. Of course, these two were head and shoulders, even though they were a little diminutive, head and shoulders above the rest of their colleagues in the 70s. Let's talk a little bit about Earl Weaver. Managed, of course, the Orioles all 10 years, 70-79. 944 wins against 656 losses, which is a .59 winning percentage. Managed 1,600 games. Now, keep in mind there was that's an average, obviously, of 160 games a year. But keep in mind that there was some labor stoppages coming out of spring training a few years there. So I want to believe it was 1972 that prevented him from managing 162 games. So Earl won himself 5 AL East titles, came in second 3 times, won 3 pennants, and he won the 1970 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. The other 2 times, 71 and 79, and he won the pennant. He lost both times to the Pittsburgh Pirates. So, yeah, that was Earl. Now, Sparky Anderson, I'm going to tell you right now, without further ado, Sparky Anderson is our manager of the decade for the 70s. So, 9 years managing the Cincinnati Reds, 1 year, a little under 1 year managing the Detroit Tigers. Sparky had a 919 victories against 636 losses for a .5906 winning percentage, which rounds up to .591. So he beats Earl there. 44 less games, but that's because of coming on kind of a third of the way through the season, or a quarter of the way through the season for the Tigers in 79. 5 NL West titles, 3 second-place finishes, which is exactly what Earl Weaver did, 4 NL pennants, and 2 World Series championships, 75 against the Boston Red Sox and 76 against the New York Yankees. 76 Reds were what I consider the greatest offensive team ever. I believe they swept the Phillies, and then they swept the Yankees. So these guys were the epitome of BAD back then. 76 Reds, of course, essentially led the league, led all leagues, meaning the AL and the NL, in every offensive category, but I believe stolen bases. So they called him Captain Hook, Sparky. Of course, they called him Sparky, too. Real name was George. But this guy could manage a team. He had, of course, great players, positions 1 through 9, or I guess positions 2 through 9, and then great bullpen. He had the ability to give players days off and bring people in and out of the lineup, and really manage the team very well. So the Captain Hook thing is kind of a it's deserved, but not necessarily for the wrong reasons. So Sparky, of course, got a cup of coffee with the Phillies in 1959, I believe it was. He was born February 22nd, 1934, died November 4th, 2020. He was 76 years old. Last game played was September 27th, 1959. I want to tell you right now that his last game managed was, I think, 1995. Not very good year that year for him managing, but he was, of course, 2-time manager of the year, 84 and 87, unfortunately for him, both with the Tigers. But he did win a World Series championship with the Tigers, too. I think he was, or maybe still is, the only person or the only manager to have done that. Probably he was the first for sure, so probably somebody else has done it by now, I'm sure. Sparky had a negative 1.2 career WAR as a player, by the way, which just popped up. Inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame as a manager in the year 2000 by the Veterans Committee. Great manager, great interview. Seemed to be not a lot of people had bad things to say about Sparky. I think which is a testament to him. Not sure if that would happen these days because people can be so darn mean, but Sparky seemed to just be a good guy who was good at what he did. And so, which is kind of the opposite of Earl. Earl Weaver was more my kind of guy, a little fiery, bit of a bit of a question asker, as I like to call myself. But again, what a great kind of interleague rivalry there between these two guys, separated by 1/1000th of a winning percentage point. Pretty impressive. So I guess we were lucky to have managers like that, one in each league back in the day. So that's that. We're going to talk a little bit about Sparky's managerial baseball card. And again, if you're following here, positions 1 through 9 will represent 71 through 79 with their baseball cards. And, of course, our manager will throw up his 1970 Topps baseball card. Beautiful Topps. It says Reds in the upper right-hand corner in red lettering. Sparky Anderson, manager, down below. And, of course, Sparky, 1969, Sparky was a coach with the San Diego Padres. And, of course, in the late 70s or late 60s, well into the 70s, I guess we can say, is the people at Topps were certainly not short on paint, so they just throw some black paint over his dark brown hat and made it look like they fooled us all by thinking Sparky was wearing just a black cap. Sparky, again, coach with the Padres, going into the off-season, supposedly, 69 into 70, he was going to take a job he was hired as a job as a base coach for the California Angels, when the same guy who signed him to his first professional contract offered him a job for Cincinnati, replacing Dave Bristol. So let's talk a little bit about George Lee Anderson's 1970 Topps baseball card. It says 5'9", 168, threw right, batted right, born 2/22/34, home Thousand Oaks, California. His bio is extensive and very flattering for a hitter of his caliber. It says a second baseman / shortstop as a player. Sparky takes over as Red skipper in 1970. An excellent fielder, he led his loops in double plays as a shortstop in 53 and as a second sacker 55, 57, and 60. Also quite adept at bunting. He led his leagues in sacrifices in 1954, 1955, and 1960. He has enjoyed good success as a minor league manager. This is his first major league opportunity. So it lists on the back his minor league, or what it says is his complete managerial record, which is all minors up to that point. He did have some success there, finished fourth 4 times and finished second twice. Keep in mind that back then the minor leagues would have half seasons, so he won a couple of half titles and won himself a real full title down in the Sally League with Asheville in '68. So that's George Sparky Anderson. He is your manager of my team from the 1970s. So let's move on to position number 1 on the baseball diamond. Tough call here. I had penciled in a guy prior to doing all my research that I thought would be the pitcher of the 70s, and then as I researched this more, it became more evident how difficult this was to call. So if you had asked me halfway through the research for this podcast, I would have told you it was somebody else. But it turns out it was the guy I thought all along. So again, we're talking wins, strikeouts, innings pitched, winning percentage, ERA, hits per 9, whip, shutouts, and WAR. Now, how I did this was I assigned in reverse order wherever that pitcher fit into the decade. So say he was the leader of strikeouts, and tell you right now that leader was Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan was assigned 10 points, and then descending order, everybody behind him. So strikeouts, it was Nolan Ryan, bested Tom Seaver by 374 strikeouts, and then Carlton was third, Bly11 was fourth, Gaylord Perry fifth, Phil Negro sixth, Fergie Jenkins seventh, etc. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So I did that for several of these key categories. So Nolan Ryan, obviously our strikeout guy. Wins would have been Jim Palmer, who was the guy I thought halfway through this that was going to do it, but he eked out Gaylord Perry by 2 wins and Tom Seaver by 8 wins. So Jim Palmer was right up there with that. Complete games, we had Gaylord Perry throwing 197 complete games. Surprisingly, obviously Gaylord Perry also innings pitched, right? So this thing was surprising to me in that the first 2 guys I had pegged, and I figured maybe Steve Carlton would be third and such. So I'm going to tell you in reverse order how they finished. Steve Carlton was actually my 5th most successful pitcher in the 70s. Don Sutton was the 4th most successful pitcher according to my metrics. Again, Gaylord Perry I would not have figured would have been in the top 5, but he finished 3rd in my pitching hooch here. And 2nd would be Jim Palmer. Now Jim Palmer obviously had a marvelous run there in the 70s, pitching for the Baltimore Orioles. At one point he had a streak of 4 straight 20-win seasons from 70 to 73, and from 75 to 77, or 75 to 78, another streak of 4 straight 20-win seasons. So that's 8 out of 9. He wasn't the same in 74 for whatever reason, but led the ERA a couple times, led the league in ERA a couple times, shutouts once in the 70s, complete games once. So surely a stud pitcher there, 2-time Cy Young Award winner. I'm sorry, that would be 3-time Cy Young Award winner in the 70s. Of course, won that championship later on in 70. Won it early on in 70 with the Orioles. Part of that pitching rotation that was just phenomenal for 4 starting pitchers with 20 victories, at least 20 victories. And that was just a great year, right? I mean, how can you? It was Mike Cuellar with 20 wins, Pat Dobson 20 wins, Palmer 20 wins, and Dave McNally with 21 wins, which is, I think we all realize that that's never going to happen again. So so that was Jim Palmer, but Jim Palmer was bested by Tom Seaver. And Tom Seaver beat him by about 9 points when you add everything up here. So Tom Terrific, or the franchise as they like to call him, essentially put the Mets on the map in 69, but he was the Rookie of the Year in 67 for the Mets with a 16-13 record. So let's talk a little bit about Tom Seaver. Let's see here. I'm trying to bring up my old lineup here on the screen. So there we go, Sparky Anderson, and then we go to Tom Seaver, right? So Tom Seaver, born November 17th, 1944 in Fresno, California. He passed away August 31st, unfortunately, 2020 in Calistoga, California. Drafted by the LA Dodgers in the 10th round of the 65 draft out of USC, and then the Braves in the first round of the 66 January draft, which is the secondary phase. I'm not quite sure how he ended up with the Mets, though. Made his major league debut on April 13th, 1967, at the age of 22. He pitched one season in the minors, and I think he was 12-12. He pitched in, I think it was Jacksonville, Mets minor league affiliate. Debut, he had 8 strikeouts, 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. I'm not sure whether he won or lost that game. His last game was September 19th, 1986, at the age of 41 and 306 days. Hall of Famer, elected 1992, 425 out of 430 ballots. Great player. Kind of came in a little bit before the 70s when he started coming in on his own, but he won 2 Cy Young Awards in the 70s. 73 he won, and 75 for Mets team that I think made it to the World Series in 73-ish, I want to say, against the A's. Ran into that A's team. But so Tom, great ERA, led a league, a National League in ERA 3 times in the 70s. Led in victories in 75, complete games in 73. He was traded to the Big Red Machine in the middle of the 1977 season, or however many games into that season. And he had a great season then, too, 21 wins against 6 losses. He did his part for Cincinnati, 14 wins, 3 losses, but I think I want to say that they weren't able to win him a ring. Of course, he won his ring in '69, so that's that for Tom Seaver's career stats. Let's talk about his 71 baseball card. Of course, we all love 1971 baseball cards. Tom throwing the ball in the outfield at Shea Stadium. Nice pinstriped home uniform there for the Mets. Tom Seaver, pitcher. Simplicity of that set is awesome. Back of the card has Tom Seaver, New York Mets pitcher, height 6'1", weight 200 and something pounds, probably 6 pounds. Right-hander, has his birth date, his hometown of Greenwich, Connecticut. The little blurb about his bio in the back recaps something that happened in '70. It says, on April 22nd, 1970, Tom tied a big league mark with 19 Ks and broke an 85-year-old mark when 10 of the Ks came consecutively. He led the NL in ERA while setting new NL strikeout mark for right-handers. And it tells us his first year in pro ball was 66 and his debut, first game in the majors, 67. So pretty impressive 1970 run there with 19 Ks and 10 in a row back in the day. So that is our pitcher, your starting pitcher for my 1970 All-Star team. All right, let's go to the catchers. The catchers, the catchers, we think of some great catchers from back in the day. Thurman Munson, obviously in the news a lot for what he did in the '70s, and should he or should he not be in the Hall of Fame. I kind of have no problem with that at all. But I will tell you that hitters in the '70s were a little different than hitters now, and catchers were catchers, and obviously there's been some great catchers throughout the years offensively. Yogi Berra comes to mind prior to the '70s, but it was a tough position. It was always a tough position. It's a grind, so finding that defensive catcher that can also hit, not easy. So this one wasn't even close when it comes to the metrics that I used. And those are, again, hits, home runs, RBIs, total bases, runs, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, batting average, and your OPS. And some WAR tossed in for those who love the taste of blood. You'd probably be surprised that the let's see here. Probably be surprised that this guy put up the numbers he did. But obviously we're talking about Johnny Bench here. And Johnny Bench, complete stud behind the plate, could handle a starting pitcher or two, and could handle the bat against the starting pitcher or two. Johnny Bench had the third most home runs in the '70s. He ripped 290 of those bad boys. Did pretty good in WAR. He was the second leading WAR getter or warmonger in the '70s. RBIs, he had the fourth most RBIs, the fifth most total bases, so it wasn't even close. Ted Simmons popped up every now and then. Thurman Munson, not really on the radar, but Johnny Bench, damn good player, right? So let's talk a little bit about Johnny Bench's career. So Johnny Bench, later on he played third base and some first base for the Reds, but he was 6'1", 197. I always thought maybe he was a little smaller than that, but 6'1's pretty tall for a catcher. Born December 7th, 1947 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. He was drafted by the Reds in the second round of the '65 Major League Baseball June amateur draft. Made his debut August 28th, 1967 at the age of 19 years, 264 days. Last game he played was September 9th, 1983 at the age of 35 years. Of course, 10 years or more, I guess, of catching really kicks your butt. So can't blame him for bowing out a little earlier than most players. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1989, 431 out of 447 ballots. He was called the Little General there. Again, he was 6'1". I don't know why we called him the Little General, but that's what they're saying they called him. Rookie of the Year in 1968, of course. 1970, your National League MVP, 45 dingers, 148 RBIs. that year, of course, they went to the World Series, losing to the Baltimore Orioles. 72, he'd come back and win another MVP by clubbing 40 more home runs, 125 RBIs. So all-star catcher throughout the 70s, essentially from 68 to 1980. He was an all-star player. Named all-star in 1983, but that was his final year. And, him and Yaz were kind of voted in because of their service, not necessarily because of what they did. Over 17 seasons, he caught 1,742 games, played some third base in there, played some first base, played some outfield. So he sprinkled his love throughout the field, playing all three outfield positions, first base and third base, as well as catching. So, there's really nothing more you could say about him. That's not a big surprise that Johnny Bench made this team as the starting catcher. We're talking 1972 for him, since he's number 2 on the field, and we have his inaction card, which is card 4 cards in the 70s, as we know. I chose the inaction one because he's flipping off. He has a soft cap underneath that mask, which they did back then. They don't have the catchers. The chest protector was pretty small as well. There, didn't cover his loins, so he's flipping his mask off, looking up in the sun. Probably William McCovey in the background there, and I want to bet he caught that ball. So card 434 has a headline from the Oakland Tribune from June 14th, 1971, and it's about Mike Epstein. So it's an inaction card, so it was either a puzzle or it was an advertisement or it was a news break. So it says, Epstein homers in 4 consecutive at-bats. Mike Epstein tied a Major League record tonight, hitting 2 home runs for a string of 4 in as many consecutive times at bat. As the A's defeated the Senators 5-1, Mike, who hit homers in his last 2 trips to the plate in the previous night's contest, made it 4 in a row with round trippers in the first and third inning tonight. This was the 17th time in baseball history that a player has hit as many as 4 consecutive homers. The only players to accomplish this feat twice was Ralph Kiner. The only player to do that was Ralph Kiner, who turned the trick for the Pirates in August of 1947 and again in September of 1949. So that's your Johnny Bench in action card from the 1972 top set, card 434, a worthy recipient of our catching position for the 1970s All-Star team. Let's move on to first base. And again, use your imagination here, because we have couple people that probably think you deserve to be at first base, but I didn't go by games played at the position, but I assure you enough games were played at this position for this guy to earn his spot here. Ted Williams is the greatest hitter of all time. The guy could hit anything, anywhere, in any conditions, off of any pitcher, and you kind of knew that no matter where the pitcher was going to put it, Ted could probably put it where he wanted to put it. And a couple guys that also remind me of that are Tony Gwynn and Wade Boggs, kind of almost like they're toying with the pitchers. There was a guy in between these folks that I felt could do the same thing, hit a ball anywhere, anytime he wanted to, and that's your first baseman, and that's Rod Carew. Okay, so Rod Carew, great first baseman, great second baseman, and just a great player. Let's talk a little bit about Rod, shall we? So Rod Carew, before we get too crazy about his hitting, let's talk about his fielding here. Just so you guys don't think I'm making things up. Rod Carew pretty much switched to first base. Well, I shouldn't say that. 1976 season for Minnesota. He played 152 games at first base, 151 in 77, 148 in 78, and in 79, 103 games at first base. So I just didn't make this up. He was a first baseman for a good part of the 70s. Playing throughout his career, he played more games at first base than at second base. it was close, but about 54 more games at first base than he did at second base. So again, he pretty much split the 90s between. I shouldn't say that. He pretty much spent most of the 70s he spent in Minnesota. In '79, he moved on to California. So many of us still think of him as a California Angel, but obviously one of the greatest Twins of all time. So Rod Carew was born October 1st, 1945 in Panama, but he went to George Washington High School in New York City. Made his debut April 11, 1967 at the age of 21. Last game was played October 5th, 1985 at the age of 40. Probably could have gone a little bit longer, but of course he had 3,053 hits, so he crossed that milestone, made it to the Hall of Fame. Inducted or elected in 1991, 401 out of 443 ballots. Rodney Cline Carew is his complete first name. Not sure if there's a nickname in there at all, but let's talk a little bit about what he did in the 70s. He could hit, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 200 hit seasons in the 70s. We could talk about his batting average. 70s, he was batting .366, 71, .307, 72, .318, 73, .350, 74, .364, 75, .359, 77, .388. And that's in 616 at bats, by the way, .388, and 78, .333, and 79, .313. So he led the league in hitting overall in his career 6 times in the 70s. He is your 1977 American League MVP as well. Finished in the top 10 there quite a few years in a row, 5 years in a row. All-Star from his rookie year of 1967 all the way to 1984. Straight up All-Star. We're number 29 for the Twins and the Angels. And 7-time batting title, 18-time All-Star, MVP, Hall of Fame, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. So this guy could hit and hit at will. On base percentage, he led the league 4 times, I should say. And I think as high as that year 388, he 449 on base percentage. So also led in on base OPS, on base plus slugging, and intentionally walked a lot. Didn't grab a whole bunch of walks, and they struck out maybe more than you thought. Like for his career, he struck out 1,028 times and walked 1,018. So he put the ball in play, though. Absolutely put the ball in play, and great player indeed. So we're going to talk about his baseball card, the 1973 Topps card, and it has him as a second baseman. And I think he is at Yankee Stadium in his Minnesota Twins road uniform. Top of the card, obviously we love that mustard yellow on the back of the 73 card, but top of the card, the cartoon says, Rod has also been a manager. I don't know what that means, but it says Rod has also been a manager. Rodney Cline Carew, 6 foot, $180, bats left, throws right, tells us where he was born, tells us that he resides in Garden Valley, Minnesota. Let's talk about his bio here on the back of his card. It says the American League's leading hitter for 1972. Rod won his second batting title after leading Loop in 1969. He's been voted as the starting second baseman on AL All-Star team each of his 6 years in circuit. Missed 1970 game due to injuries. So again, at this point, he is a hard and fast second baseman. But as I've told you, Baseball Reference has him kind of switching over to first base around the 1976 season. So he is my first baseman and probably the best pure hitter of the 1970s. So moving on here to second base. Second base, initially, you could have Rod Carew at second base, I suppose, right? I'm going to tell you right now, my predictions were so far Seaver, Bench, and Carew, and I was right, even though I vacillated when Jim Palmer came into the picture during research. Second baseman, same thing, and second baseman was really a competition between Rod Carew and this chap, and of course we're talking about Joe Morgan here. Little Joe was quite a hitter back then, and of course we know for the Big Red Machine in the '70s, but he wasn't always a Red. He started out with the Astros back in the day, but man, Joe could hit, and Joe could hold his own there in the '70s for sure. Let me see if I can bring some of his information up. So, one of the problems is you run into kind of a roadblock in your head, like, we got too many Reds here, but the Reds were a great team back then, right? And all their players could put up some numbers. Orioles were a great team in the '70s, but the Orioles had a lot of role players. These guys for the Reds pretty much stepped outside of those roles and were stars at their position. Not necessarily guys like Joe Morgan they wouldn't lead the league in a bunch of categories, but Joe Morgan put a lot together at second base for the Reds. Of course, he batted left, threw right. He was 5'7", 160 pounds. I'm sure he was a little heavier as his career wore on, but man, that's a pretty diminutive person for putting up the numbers he put up. September 19th, 1943, he was born in Bonham, Texas. He passed away October 11th, 2020 at the age of 77 in Danville, California. Went to school at Castlemont High School in Oakland, California. Also went to college there, Cal State, East Bay, Hayward, and such. So he made his debut September 21st, 1963. He was 20 years old, and of course he was with the Houston Astros. It was probably a late season call-up since he only played 8 games in '63 and 10 games in '64. His last game was September 30th, 1984, and I believe he was wearing an Oakland A's uniform for the home team A's. Inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1990, 363 out of 444 ballots. He was called Little Joe or the Little General, and that name fit him to a T, obviously. So, again, looking back on the stats, he was an MVP winner in '75 and '76, and it's no coincidence that was the 2 years the Reds won the World Series. 2-time MVP, 10-time All-Star, 2-time Major League Player of the Year, All-Star MVP as well. He won a Silver Slugger, 5-time Gold Glove winner. Of course, we know him as number 8 for the Reds, and came to the Reds in '72 and immediately led the league in on-base percentage. He had 115 bases on balls, 122 runs scored while batting .292. His MVP seasons would lead the league again in essentially the on-base percentage both years. He did that for 4 years in the '70s. He led the league in OBP. Scored a lot of runs, took a lot of walks, and his average, he would hit in the 290s for the most part. But a little later on in his career, there's '75, he started jacking into the 320s, but kind of right around 300 for the most part. But really, really a solid cog to that team. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He won, I guess, from '72 to '80, he was an All-Star every year for the Reds, and of course 2 years for the Astros, it looks like, as well. So solid guy there at second base for our team. Yeah, he was quite a little player. Obviously, we know the pump he would do with his left arm when he came up to the bat. Told him to keep his elbow up, I think it was, or elbow down. I'm not sure what it was, but Joe played most of his games at second base, 22 seasons, 2,500 games plus at second base. Played a little outfield, and that's about it. So anyway, that is our guy there at second base. Let's talk about his card. I've chosen his 1974 3D Superstars Kellogg's card. Now, these things are kind of hard to read. I have it over. If you give me a second, I can go get this card, and I'll read from it. All right, so the back of this card, front of the card looks great, by the way. Typical Kellogg's 3D with a sideways autograph going up the left. Second base, little plaque at the top there, a little banner at the bottom says Morgan. So Joe Leonard Morgan has his vitals on there. Says he loves to play golf and billiards. Upper left has a little picture of Joe in blue and black and white. I guess there's only blue ink on the back, so it's blue and white. Cincinnati Reds logo. Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball Players Association are represented with their shields on the back. Official authorized card. Has his records. Has all sorts of fun stuff on there. It says 1974 Exograph, who makes cards. Insignia, trademark of Major League Club. 1968 MLBP Association, and this is series 54, series of 54, but card number 36. So the bio here says Joe enjoyed personal highs in the base hits, doubles, homers, and RBIs while helping lead Cincinnati to the Western Division title last year. Of course, this is 1974, talking about 1973. Morgan's 67 stolen bases, just 3 less than Lou Brock's Major League leading total, brought Joe's career bag to 320. Let me look at that. That's something I overlooked here because not a lot of our guys are stealing bases. But Joe had a total of 689 stolen bases in his career, caught 162 times. So it's pretty good hustle on those bases. Obviously, that's why he scored a lot of runs, 1,650 throughout his career. So kudos to our boy Joe Morgan at second base. And I'll be back. I had to put Joe back real quick. All right, so we are moving on to third base, which would be our next position here, right? Position number 5 in the lineup. This will be controversial because of the person in this position and because of the position I put this person in and because of the positions this person put themselves in. But third baseman, Michael Jack Schmidt. I love Michael Jack Schmidt. Didn't start playing baseball in the professional leagues, or at least the major leagues, until 1972. Brooks Robinson bowed out about 3/4 of the way through the season, I think 1977. So I put a guy down here in my mind who I thought was going to be the best third baseman of the decade, and I might or might not have been wrong, but it just wasn't enough. I had to put the guy who I did put in. I had to put in for offensive reasons. Greg Nettles obviously is a great defensive third baseman. Played throughout the decade every year. Did all right in some of the categories. I think he was 4th in WAR for all players in the 70s that qualified under my parameters, and showed up in a couple other categories a little farther down on the list, like home runs. He was 7th, RBIs he was 10th, and total bases he was 9th. But I chose to put, here we go here, I'm going to duck once I say this, but I chose to put Pete Rose down here, okay? I had to put Pete Rose somewhere in our lineup, and Pete Rose obviously just racked up all sorts of stats in the 1970s. But with that said, he also played a little third base there. In fact, during his career, he played, I think, 634 games at third base. So I put him down in 75. He played 137 games there. I know in 76 he played 159 games, 77, 161. 78, 156 games, and that was enough for him to qualify as my third baseman of the decade of the 70s. Of course, Pete, we know what Pete did, right? Pete had 2,045 hits in the 70s, which is phenomenal. That's over 200 hits a season. He also had a boatload of plate appearances, nearly 1,000 more than the second most in the league. 1,508 singles, which is 100 more than Carew. Runs, he finished head on runs, and it just went on and on and on. So he's deserving, obviously, to be there. Metrics-wise, he, in the 70s, most hits, most total bases, most runs, second best batting average. So what did he bat in the set? He batted .314. So I had a minimum amount of games that had to be qualified for that. So second best batting average. WAR, he was number 6 in WAR. And on base percentage, he was fourth in on base percentage. So he obviously got up the bat a lot and scored a lot of runs, got a lot of hits, all that stuff. So he's our third baseman in the 70s. Not sure if we want to talk about his whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame or not, but whatever, we won't do that right now. So Baseball Reference clearly listed him as a outfielder, first baseman, and third baseman. Obviously, switch hitter through right, 5'11", 192 pounds, born April 14th, 1941. He's 81 years old right now, went to Western Hills High School in Cincinnati, made his debut April 8th, 1963 at the age of 21. Last game was August 17th, 1986 at the age of 45. Charlie Hustle, of course, that's that. Finished with 4,256 hits, which is a major league record, 14,053 at-bats, 15,890 plate appearances, and 3,562 games played. These are all, of course, major league records. In the 70s, of course, he got the decade off with a bang by steamrolling over Ray Fosse. And All-Star every year except for 1972. He was the MVP of the 1974 season. Of course, he in his career, he was a three-time world champion, 75, 76, and, of course, 1980 with the Phillies. Rookie of the Year, 17-time All-Star, two-time Gold Glove winner. And he won both of those Gold Gloves, I believe, in, let's see here, in the outfield. So he kind of, somewhere in the outfield. 69 or 68 and 69, he was playing in the outfield. So he was a two-time Gold Glove Award winner there. 69 and 70. So he did win one in the 70s, but he was playing outfield. Three-time batting title, Silver Slugger, all that fun stuff. So Pete Rose, he's your third baseman for this team. We're going to go to his 1975 card here. Beautiful card, has yellow above red. NL All-Star Outfield with the star at the bottom right. Pete Rose facsimile signature. And, of course, the back of the cards, which I absolutely love, have his height, weight, all his fun stats, where he was born, where he lives. And it tells us, what is Pete Rose's nickname? Charlie Hustle, of course. You know, we know that, but maybe 1975, that wasn't the case. Card number 320, and his one bio line, because he's got a lot of career stat lines there. His one bio line says, Pete led both leagues in doubles, 1974. So that's your third baseman, 1975 tops, Peter Edward Rose. Bam. All right, shortstop was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do on this podcast, was figure out a shortstop for this. Now, in our metrics, there's only really one shortstop that showed up here, and I'm going to come right out and tell you he had the 7th most hits in the 1970s, and his name was Larry Boa. Okay? Let that sink in for a second here. Larry Boa had 1,552 hits, which was more than Ted Simmons and slightly less than Tony Perez, who was probably was deserving of consideration for first base, but we'll get to that in a second, or a few minutes. So Larry Boa got a lot of hits, but he also batted a lot, and he batted he didn't hit very well. He hit .262 in the 70s. And keep in mind, back then, all you wanted was your shortstop to turn double plays and run to the left field line to catch balls that the first baseman couldn't in foul territory. Wouldn't be till Cal Ripken came along before shortstops became a pretty big deal at the plate. And, of course, A-Rod came along after that, and shortstops were pretty much redefined in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. So this little battle's between three fellas here, Larry Bowa, Bert Campaneris, and Dave Concepcion. Now, Larry Bowa did not win a championship in the 1970s. Bert Campaneris won 3, and, of course, Dave Concepcion won 2. Their stats are very, very, very similar. Campaneris, 1,283 hits in the 70s. Concepcion, 1,268, and Bowa, 1,552. But Bowa's 262 average was less than Dave Concepcion's at 270, but more than Bert Campaneris' at 255. Now, on base percentage, Bowa had 299, Campaneris 310, and Concepcion 325. Slugging, 622 for Bowa, 645 for Campaneris, and 695 for Concepcion. Campaneris had 1,342 games, Dave Concepcion 1,349, and Bowa 1,489. This is where Campaneris has a 36.1 WAR, Bowa has a 19.1 WAR, and a 30.1 WAR for Concepcion. So I'm going to tell you what separated these guys here. Campaneris was a 6-time All-Star. Bowa was a 5-time All-Star. Concepcion was a 9-time All-Star, but where Davey Concepcion gets it in my book is he was also a 5-time Gold Glover versus 2 for Bowa and 0 for Campaneris. So Dave Concepcion again is your shortstop of the decade in my mind. Okay, my little mind. That's where he is. Again, it's difficult to keep throwing Reds in there, but this guy was deserving. But it was a tough ballot, tough fight. A lot of pencils were broken and thrown. So Dave Concepcion, right-handed batter, right-handed thrower, 6'2", 155, pretty big for a shortstop, right? Born June 17th, 1948 in Venezuela. And made his debut April 6, 1970 at the age of 21. Last game played September 15th, 1988 at the age of 40. And full name, David Ishmael Concepcion. And what I love about David Concepcion, 2,488 baseball games, 19 years, one team. Always love those one-team guys. The advent of free agency, obviously, Bowa and Campaneris would jump around a little bit in the late 70s, or Bowa's case, the early 80s. But Concepcion was kind of a rock there. All-Star, 73, 75, 76, 77, all the way up to 82. He was the All-Star. He was an All-Star. So never led the league in anything, but he never really embarrassed his team either. He would hit solid 270s to 280s, maxing out at 301 and 306, 301 and 78 and 306 and 81. So reliable at the plate. Could get some RBIs, could get some home runs if needed. But again, you didn't ask for much from your shortstop other than the glove, and he won the Gold Glove 74, 75, 76, 77, and 79. So he's deserving there. We're going to bring up his card here. His 76 SSPC. Of course, Dave is leaning over in Shea Stadium, as every one of these cards was taken at Shea Stadium. This is card number 34 for the SSPC set from 1976, even though it's got a 1975 copyright on it. So Cincinnati Reds, number 13. Shortstop, 6'2", 165, born 6/17/48, BR-3R, bats right, BR-TR, bats right, throws right. David Ishmael Concepcion. Dave had another fine year for the Reds in 1975, finishing at 274 over 140 games. He hit 23 doubles, 1 triple, and 5 homers, stole 33 bases, second on the Reds, and had 49 RBIs. He added a homer and 4 RBIs in the World Series against Boston. Dave joined the Reds in 1970 after only 2 seasons in the minors and gradually solidified himself as the Reds' shortstop, raising his average from 209 in 72 to 287 in 73. His best year at the plate was 1974, as he made 167 hits, including 25 doubles and 14 homers, drove in 82 runs, and stole 41 bases. He now has a .256 average, 89 doubles, 14 triples, 31 homers, 247 RBIs, and 128 steals over 739 games. He has 9 RBIs in 16 series contests. So, of course, the SSBC set did not have year-by-year or career totals, so they wrote them out for us right there. All right, we are going to move on to the outfield now, and this is where it gets a little crazy, folks. So hold on to your hens, your chickens, your pigs, all that stuff, because the wind's blowing. Left field, position number 7 on our field. This is going to be controversial, but this guy deserves to be in the lineup, and the Yinzers out there are saying what took so long. But we're going to talk a little bit about Willie Stargill. Willie Stargill is our starting left fielder. And that may seem odd to you guys and gals, but Willie Stargill played himself in the outfield for many, many games. Let's see here. In fact, 1,296 games he played in the outfield. 1,229 of those were in left field, and 848 games he played at first base. So throughout the 70s, Willie was predominantly an outfielder. He didn't really switch to first base until 1975, but he racked up a lot of games in the outfield the first half of the decade. So Willie Stargill is our left fielder for our 1970s team. Willie was born March 6, 1940 in Earlsboro, Oklahoma, and passed away April 9th, 2001, at the age of 61 in Wilmington, North Carolina. 6'2", 188 pounds. Of course, that was probably his birth weight. Threw left, batted left. Made his debut September 16th, 1962, at the age of 22. Last game, October 3rd, 1982, at the age of 42. Hall of Fame elected in 1988, 352 out of the 427 ballots. Wilver Dornell Stargill was known as Pops to his teammates. So big hitter, big boomer, right? I think every stadium in the 70s had a big star in the outfield where Willie Stargill hit a tape measure home run. Led the league in home runs in 71 with 48 and also in 73 with 44. Led the league in RBIs in 73 with 119. Slugging percentage in 73 was .646 and OPS 1.038. He was the AL MVP runner-up that year in 73. Of course, Willie put it all together in 79, 32 homers, 82 RBIs. He won the MVP, and the Pittsburgh Pirates won the World Series championship. Was one of 2 World Series championships that he won. Of course, he won one in 1971 as well. 7-time All-Star. Kind of hit the trifecta there. He's been a league MVP, an NLCS MVP, and the World Series MVP. Of course, that 79 MVP award, he was the co-MVP with Keith Hernandez. Both got 216 vote points, 64% each of the ballots there. So co-MVP, Willie Stargill, 1979, but known as Pops, and boy, could he hit the ball, right? He could also strike out a lot, but he could hit the ball. He finished with a .282 career average, which wasn't bad, 2,232 hits, but of course 475 home runs. A little sad that he didn't get 500 home runs because he's probably one of those guys more than others that deserve to be in that club because he could hit them. Willie's card. We're going to talk about the 1977 here. Pepsi glove discs. I featured these on an episode a while back. Go look for it if you want. Backs of the cards are essentially all the same with the Pepsi glove discs for a contest or for a Pete Rose shirt. You can fill out and get a Pete Rose shirt. Checklist on the bottom tab there. Inside the glove is a disc that has no stats, but it has Willie Stargill. Tells us that he's an outfielder. Thank you very much, with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and has some of his stats on the left and other vitals on the right. So that's Pops. That's Pops' card from 1977. Let's move on to center field here, position number 8. This is the one that kind of got me, took me by surprise. So this next cat here finished in the top 10 in 7 different metrics and was actually the 4th overall points earner out of position players in the 70s. So I'm talking about Bobby Bonds, okay? And sure, he was a we know him as Barry Bonds' father, but this guy could play. And one of the weird things about the 70s is obviously he came up with those great Giants teams of the late 70s, but he could play for some teams. He played for the Giants, the Yankees, the Angels, the White Sox, the Rangers, and the Cleveland Indians all throughout the 70s. And, of course, he would add the St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago Cubs to his resume in 80 and 81. So not only could he could play anywhere. Surprisingly, he was number 2 in total bases and number 2 in runs in the 70s for overall altogether, no matter who. The only person that beat him in either one of those was Pete Rose. So, yeah, that's very surprising that he did that well. Home runs as well. He was the number 4 in home runs for the decade, and he was number 5 in hits for the decade of the 70s, which is pretty impressive. On top of that, RBIs, he had the 7th most RBIs, and his WAR was 8th in the 70s. Slugging percentage, he was 9th, so he could put up some some stats for sure. Never really won anything. He was an All-Star Game MVP and a 3-time All-Star and a 3-time Gold Glover, but probably just as moody as his son was. But he could play some baseball and probably doesn't get the credit he deserves. He had a great decade, and that's about that. Bobby Bonds was born in March 15th, 1946 in Riverside, California. He passed away August 23rd, 2003 at the age of 57 in San Carlos, California. Riverside High made his debut June 25th, 1968 at the age of 22. Last game, age 35, October 4th, 1981. 2 at-bats, 0, 0, 0, 0, all across. He did a home run in his hit a homer in his debut in 1968, by the way. Full name Bobby Lee Bonds. Probably didn't stick around anywhere long enough to get himself a nickname. But he led the league in runs in 69 and strikeouts in 69. Led the league in strikeouts again in 70 and plate appearances in 70. Strikeouts, he loved to strike out. So 148 strikeouts in 73. He led the league, but also had the most total bases in 73 with 341 and the most runs with 131 in 1973. So he could score. He could drive some runs in, a couple 100 RBI seasons. Also had 4 30-30 seasons, make that 5 30-30 seasons. So he could steal some bases as well. Back when 30-30 was a big deal. But again, a lot of hits, a lot of total bases in the 80s, and career cut short for whatever reasons. I'm not going to speculate. But, didn't really make much of a mark other than winning a couple Gold Gloves and an MVP award in an All-Star game. So, but he's right up there in the stats. So great earner of stats, Bobby Bonds. We're going to throw his 1978 wiffle ball card up on the screen here. Kind of like the other discs that we showed, the Pepsi Glove discs and the Isolé discs and all that stuff, the cranes, but these were wiffle ball discs. They came on your wiffle ball bat with your wiffle ball right there. So same setup, ball disc, round, nice threads of a baseball around there, nice seams on each side, mustard yellow. No logos on that thing because it was just a Players Association thing. But the back of the card looks awesome. The back of the card looks like a wiffle ball. It says Wiffle Sports Spectacular Collector's Series Limited Edition MSA. 3 stars on each side, and the holes for the wiffle balls. on top. So that's Bobby Bonds, your center fielder. Let's see what he did out in the field, if you guys don't mind. So he played himself only 296 games in center field. He was predominantly a right fielder, but I already got a right fielder on this team, so and nobody was going to knock this guy off. So without further ado, number 9 position here, number 1 in my heart for the 1970s, Reggie Jackson, of course. You can't go wrong with Reggie. And Reggie himself told me that. So Reggie Jackson, of course, we don't really need to learn too much about Reggie, but we're gonna go over a couple of his stats real quick, if you don't mind. Reggie hit the second most homers in the 1970s, 292 behind Willie Stargill's 296. He showed up in 7 different metrics here for us. Second in home runs. This may surprise you, but he also had a lot of RBIs, so 922 RBIs. Nice little WAR there. He was, I think he was 5th in WAR. Total bases, he's 4th. On base plus slugging, he was 4th as well. So Reggie, of course, could hit the ball and deserves his own episode as well. So Reggie was an MVP in 1973. 5-time World Series champion in 1970s, 72, 73, 74, and 77 and 78. 2-time World Series MVP, 2-time Silver Slugger, 14-time All-Star. WAR number 9 over there in Oakland. WAR number 9 in Baltimore. WAR number 44 from there on out in New York, California, and Oakland again. So Reggie was born May 18th, 1946. He's currently 75 years old, born in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia, Abington, Pennsylvania. Went to Arizona State on a football scholarship. Made his debut June 9, 1967. Last game, October 4th, 1987. So debuted at 21 and retired at 41. Hall of Fame. 1993, 396 out of 423 ballots. Full name, Reginald Martinez Jackson. Mr. October, also known as Buck back in his days in Oakland. So he could also strike out just as much as Bobby Bonds apparently too. But when Reggie led the league in home runs, it was with a totals that were kind of low by today's standards, 32, 36, 39, 41. He had 47 and 69, but that was second. That was second that year to Harmon Killebrew, who had 49, and Harmon Killebrew won the MVP that year as well. So anyway, Reggie totaled 563 home runs, 1,702 RBIs, and he is your current Major League Baseball career strikeout leader with 2,597. But those 5 rings don't lie, folks. Of course, he spent most of his career in the outfield, playing 2,102 games, most of those in right field, a couple in center field and a couple in left field, and some DHing. Never played in the infield, thank goodness. But Reggie is that guy. I'm going to bring up his 1979 Kellogg's 3D Superstars card, R.M. Jackson D-8 outfield. Reggie Jackson is listed as R.M. Jackson because there was also Ron Jackson from the California Angels that year. This also has an error variation. It's the amount of games played in the season before 1978. One variation has 162 games, the other has 139. So anyway, I won't bore you. Same, it's got a little Tony Tiger upper left-hand corner, Reggie's stats year by year, and the regular logos in the upper right for the team, the league, and the players. It says more arithmetic will never be sufficient to explain Reggie's ability to produce the big hit or the big play in a key situation. By all odds, he's one of baseball's finest pressure performances. So obviously, we know that. Tony the Tiger knows that, all that stuff. So there's no doubt about that. Mr. October, love him dearly. Best player of the 70s in my mind. And we're going to finish this up right here. Hopefully you're done sorting every card from the 70s. This podcast is taking that long, but we're going to finish up here naming our honorary captain, and a man who was disappointing in the metrics, but always will be my favorite player that ever played, and that's Karl Michael Yastrowski. He's our honorary captain here. And Yaz, great 60s career, great 70s career. Probably would have been a lot higher up on this list had he not boogered his shoulder up somewhere in the late 60s. But obviously, my affection for Karl Yastrowski is renowned, so I won't go into it. But what we will talk about is his 1979 Topps comic, which doesn't get enough credit. I love the set. I bought these cards in the bubblegum, wrapped in bubblegum back in the late 70s. This card is flush with yellow and red, and two pictures of Yaz. One portrait, of course, he's not smiling. He never does. And one swinging. Yaz was the AL's most valuable player in 1967, hit .455 versus A's in the 1975 AL Championship. This is card number 3 of 33. And in the bottom right, it has a little inside baseball blurb that says, "The batter is automatically out when the infield fly rule is called." So that card was printed in 1979 by the Topps Chewing Gum Company, and it was printed in the USA. And it wasn't really a card; it was a piece of wax cartoon, which was pretty cool. So that's that. I'm going to bring in the Skycam here, 1970 Skycam, and hold on a second here. Let me figure this out. So there you have it. The players on the field, right behind me right now, in their positions, ready to go. Yaz in the first base coach box. Sparky Anderson giving the signs in the third base. And that's our team of the decade, 1970s. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have an alternative take, please feel free to comment any which way you want. Yap at me at ThatSeventiesCardShow@gmail.com, ThatSeventiesCardShow on YouTube, or 70sCard on Twitter. Again, thanks for joining me this week, my journey back in time. Let me know, comments, suggestions, all that stuff, guys, gals. Music on the podcast is by Mango Safari, and I appreciate you guys sticking around for the long term here. Enjoy your collecting, and more importantly, enjoy your collection. Have a great week. Everybody, please be safe. Thank you.